Hello, everyone. I have a error message over here. I'll worry about that later. Anyway, so happy Friday and welcome to the Cope Life Podcast interview series. I'm so excited to be here. And every week I just try to bring you stories that will amaze and inspire you. And yeah, today is no different. Today I have a special guest, Amori Colbert, and she is someone that well, you can look at her and tell that she's young, but she's had a lifetime of experiences that I have not endured, and she's going to tell you all about it. So, I don't like to waste time. Let's just jump right in. Welcome, Amori. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be.
All right. So, just tell us about yourself. Tell me who you are and tell me something about you.
Okay, yeah, who I think about me. I am Amori Colbert. I'm actually, though I look young, 30 is still young, but turned 30, so I'm super excited about that. Trying to make the year really great. And additionally, I have been in the Air Force for about 11 years next month. So I am an airman. I love helping people, um, coaching people through trauma, and that mindset of not just surviving but thriving. I do this through a life coaching business that I have. And additionally, I love to share empowerment and motivation, and I do that through speaking engagements. So that's a little bit about me.
All right. Well, yeah, you love to help coach people through trauma, through life's tragedies, really just helping them to get through, to endure, to overcome. But you had to do a lot of that yourself.
Absolutely.
And so, why don't you tell us your story and what you've had to endure?
Yeah, so I think it's super important, obviously, if you're going to help someone to have helped yourself first. I think
Yes.
that keeps it healthy. You want to have more of a my pot overflowing, so now I can help you versus I'm empty and now I'm giving what I have to you. So absolutely, I've been through a lot of trauma that caused me to go through a lot of anxiety that I had to overcome. And those traumas were in a myriad of different facets of life. So when I was younger, for lost my father the week before his 60th birthday. So I grew up with being raised by women. I like to frame it that. And then additionally, there was a lot of depression with that in my youth, which caused me to have to overcome insecurities and just anxieties and fears. And then, kind of when I started overcoming that, I ended up actually almost losing my family to a domestic violence event where my stepfather at the time opened fire on my mother and my brother while they were just coming home from football practice. I was in the area. I was in the Air Force at the time, but I was on routine leave. So I ended up coming back from the event that I was at. I was at church at the time with my grandmother, which is a usual Southern thing. You usually go to church with your grandmother on Wednesdays. So we got the call when we were in service that they had been shot, and we rushed to the hospital, and I found out I was losing my brother, and he was fighting for his life. So I went through that. My family went through that about around 2013. And then following some years from there, still while in the Air Force, I ended up losing um, my brother-in-law at the time to suicide, and then the same day, my troop attempting suicide. And then I lost my uncle shortly after that, who was my last father figure. So it was like years of compounded depression, trauma, me overcoming it, then something else happening. But that caused a lot of hopelessness, because it's like, hey, what did I do to deserve this? You know, and that causes guilt. So all of those things had these symptoms a lot of people are dealing with today that I had to overcome, which helps me to people across the board.
You have such a powerful story, and there's so many chapters to it,
Yeah.
right? You know, and what I love is that you recognize with you helping people now, you recognize that you are still the author of your life, despite what the previous chapters, said how they were written. I want to take it back to though when you talk about losing your father. I believe you said the day before your sixth birthday, around that time.
Yeah, it was like the week before, so I hadn't heard for a while, and I'm like, "Hey, where's my dad?" And then we got the call, so yeah, it was all around that time of my birth.
So when you're that young, when you lose your father at that age, how does that impact, like, really, how did that impact you in regards to your perspective on life and how you felt about yourself? And the reason I ask that is because I think we often don't give children enough credit to think on that level.
Yeah, that is such a great question, because I reflected on it a lot, and I'll use this example. So you don't realize how many things involve, or maybe you do involve, like a father just in the world until you don't, and and the world reminds you that. So a really great example of this is like how it impacted me is every year at school there are daddy daughter dances. So it's like I never,
Mhm.
because I didn't have a father by the time I was in school. And so like moments like that actually repeated the message in my mind that I missed something. And the domino effect of that was that like I'm not enough from losing my father, which wasn't my fault. But it's like once you start dwelling on things long enough, and it's just you and your thoughts in your mind, you start internalizing those things, even though they're not really attached to you and don't really belong to you. So it, in some ways, I feel that it stunted my growth because at every chapter of my life, I was thinking I wasn't enough, so I wasn't enjoying life like because I was constantly battling those thoughts of like, I don't have a father. Maybe, even a lot of times I was like, maybe he's alive. Like, maybe he'll pop up one day. And so there's that. And then when it doesn't happen, it feeds the thought of hopelessness, the thought you're not enough. And then once you're like angry, which is around my teen years, you start asking why. And then you start blaming. And then you get like, it affects your mood in that way. So again, like you're just not enjoying your the youth as much as you could because you're at a loss. There's unresolved grief, and during this time, I learned like the detriment to unresolved grief, which again brings me back to coaching. Why, and even therapy, why it's so important now to me to remind to just talk because I think that if I would have just had that communication about this is what I'm feeling, it would have helped me go through those stages of grief and maybe heal a little bit faster. But since I didn't, yeah, it affected me in that way where I didn't think I was enough for a long time. And I maybe I did something to deserve this. And
Right. It makes perfect sense. Everything that you're saying when I think about it, because especially from the perspective of a young child, right? We don't have those adult analytical skills.
right,
So yeah, it's very black and white, very very simple and plain. There's a daddy daughter dance, and I'm not good enough to go because I don't have a dad, and
right,
that's it. There's not a lot of deep analysis.
right,
There's that thought which no one can combat, followed by just how you feel, how you deal with it, because at that point in time you didn't have an extensive background in therapy or something. You were sick,
right,
so um,
right.
and so speaking of that, I wonder how did your family, how did the older members of your family, the adults in your family, how did they soothe you or comfort you, or what attention did they give you after your father's death, just to help you through this process? And I'll preface it by saying this. I'm asking because a lot of times we will say children are resilient, and that'll be our excuse to ignore them. So I'm curious how your time went.
Yeah, again, like such a great question because now it's super important to me. Unfortunately, losing my uncle meant that my younger cousins who were the same age as me lost their dad at the same age I did. So, because of me, to your point, not having that attention that I needed, I think during that time, I give it a lot to them, and I want to bring it back to you because like it's not anyone's fault. Like my mom's grieving the time she had another child, so she was like pregnant with my younger brother. So it's like, and then she's a mom, and she's usually doing most things on her own. So she only has so much capacity, and it actually taught me to be very self because I had to start taking care of myself if I was sad or if I needed also had to start helping my mom. And so I think it actually how it affected me was that it doesn't matter because life is going on, even though so my hurt and my pain must not be that important, even though I'm like really dying on that. And what that like unfortunately made me think throughout the years was that whenever I'm sad and whenever I'm hurting, it doesn't matter. You just keep going, which to your point isn't the best because then you
Right.
get your adulthood and you're like, oh my goodness, like I have all these issues. Why? And then you have to, break all the layers and find the inner child, like a lot of people were talking about, and solve that when you're established and things. And that causes a lot of waves, I think, in your normal routine. Um, so yeah, just to go back to what you were originally saying, I think it's super important to give children the attention they need so that as they grow, like they're able to grow through that instead of like having to worry it and figure it out when they're
Yeah, that's very true because I mean the concept of figuring it out, right? It's not like, oh, here's a puzzle, let me figure out the puzzle.
right.
It's you lost your father. Like you don't just go figure that out. You're not gonna go Google, right? How do you figure out losing my father before my sixth birthday?
Yeah.
And then from there you talk about being very self-sufficient. And I kind of just want to get into the idea of it's one thing to be independent as a child. It's another thing to be forced to be independent and to have a sense of loneliness where you have to but you don't want to, right?
Right.
So tell me, so you kind of went through that a little bit.
100%. I've struggled with loneliness for a long time. That was something I had to overcome. It's something that I work with people a lot on because I learned to be lonely and that it's okay. So what good came out of that? Well, I got really good at like reading and I would escape to watch movies with people who have friends and like a loving family. It was like mom and a dad, like I watched all those shows and it's like, but when you don't have the show and you don't have the fantasy and you have to start dealing with a loneliness, it's a lot to take on as a child. So thank God my like vices were movies, but it makes a lot of sense why some, folks in adolescence turn to drugs or like drinking or what have you, because those are the things that help you to escape the loneliness that comes from maybe not having the attention when you were younger, when you went through something. And you, like you said, not having the analytical skills to deal with it. So, all that to say, yeah, I was really, really lonely all of my childhood, all of it, because I was also helping to raise my brother. So, on top of me, like, not having my father, I had to raise my brothers who had their father. And so now it's reinstating the thought that I'm not good enough, but I still have to keep going. So it's reinstating the thought that, but this is what I deserve. Like I deserve to not have to deal with my pain, not be good enough to be lonely because it's okay. I'm growing up. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a part of that, I'm just going to say this and you can tell me what you think. But I think a part of that is when you're struggling and you don't realize that other people don't know how bad you're struggling.
Hmm.
So you're struggling and they see you struggling, but they think you're okay. So essentially, they are demonstrating to you that it's acceptable, right? Like
Hmm.
it's acceptable that you're lonely. It's acceptable that you're struggling. It's acceptable that you feel worthless. That's kind of the message they sent to you by not acknowledging your pain.
Yeah, and you know something, I realized because I've talked to a lot of like young women, kind of with the same background, or maybe they like went through something. And it's also, and this is like sad to say, but sometimes the folks you're around, even the adults around, don't have the tools
All right.
to help you through it because nobody gave them the tools. So they very well are walking around with that same unresolved pain and guilt. And they very well are telling you it's okay.
Yes.
So correct, like everything you're saying, like, yeah, they're like, yep, welcome to our world. This is acceptable. Just keep going, keep pushing, even though there's pain that's unresolved, even though you're hurting. It doesn't matter as much because you have to keep going. And yeah, I definitely got to a point where I was like, you know what, this does matter. And I was one of the first people in my immediate family to start getting that, to start talking to it and not be like afraid or not feel bad about it, but like, yeah, let's talk every week because I have all these things. And it was really free because it helped me to know that I wasn't alone. To your point, that so many people are going through this, but they're saying it's acceptable and it's not because we deserve the help and we are enough and we deserve to be happy and we deserve to live and thrive and enjoy life, you know.
I love that. I love you saying that, right? It's so powerful. We deserve to be happy. We deserve help. We deserve to enjoy life because there's so many things that happened that led you to believe you didn't deserve it.
Right.
And so what happened was you couldn't go out and look for evidence on the contrary. You just had to decide, I deserve to be happy. You had to make a decision. There wasn't something you could work through where that changed your beliefs about yourself in a sense, like a worksheet or a workbook. There's therapy, of course, but the decision ultimately was yours.
Yeah.
And so when I think about that, I'm thinking about your timeline. So you endured this as a young child, and then as a teenager, that's when the angriness began to set in. The anger set in, but you were still taking care of your little brothers. And then at some point in time, you decided, obviously after high school, to join the Air Force.
Yeah.
So what was kind of your mindset like when you went to basic training? Because there's a whole history there, and you've just decided, you know what, I'm making this move for me. So can you talk about that mindset and
Yeah.
that decision?
Yeah. So I definitely fell into the Air Force. I wasn't like, I want to do this. I graduated school and there was a boy, my first love, and he was going to the Marines. So I was like, well, we have to stay together. So I'm going to go to the Air Force.
Okay.
And so at this, talked to my mom, and originally I was like, hey, I'm going to go to the military. And she was like, well, if you're going to go, you better go Air Force. So like all this time I I'm gonna try and put this into words the best that I can. I'm not like making this decision in my mind like I need a change. Literally, my entire being is screaming for something to change. For
Yes.
to my entire being, like it's like an inner feeling of like we can't stay here. So there was like a sink or swim, like jump or fly. Like there was like this thing that's like internal that's saying we can't be this sad. We can't be this anymore. And to be honest, every decision that I've made to improve, that has been the driving factor. It hasn't always been this is my choice. And I say that before I say everything else, to say like a lot of people feel that and just follow that, because that's your heart telling you that it's time for change and welcoming you to opportunities that, that are there for you to go on to. So that's what I did. And it was definitely something where it was like of the essence. I felt like it was for me because I got into the Air Force like it usually takes people months. It took me like a month. Like everything from going to the recruiter's office to leaving for basic training. Like it was the easiest, shortest time that I've heard of someone getting in the military. So I just feel like myself, God, like everything was like, hey, you need to make a move and we're just going to give you this opportunity, because if not, like, who knows? So I go to basic, and it's so funny. I've experienced so much pain my whole life by this time that when I get to basic, I'm like, oh, wow, this stability, this is nice. Because I was so depressed growing up that I wouldn't even eat 3 meals a day a lot of times. And I would stay up until 1 a.m. and then went to school. Like, oh, there was opportunity for structure in my home. Like, I was going through so much internally that I didn't feel that. So going to basic and having that, like, this is nice. I like ate all my food. Like I gained weight because I was really underweight because of just stress. I started believing in myself because I was really good at cooking, so they in detail. So a lot of people were like, when they first got there, we call our families and they're like, "Mom, I made it," and I'm like, "Hey guys, like here, like fine. Talk to you later." Letters, like because I was in this healthy place, and I had not healthy is a great word. I had not felt like I was in a healthy place like ever. And that doesn't say that my mom and my grandmother did an amazing environment for me, because they did what they could with what to take.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's still that part of you that you need that isn't being fulfilled and doesn't feel healthy. So when I went to basic, I felt that like the Air Force in my first few years were some of the best. I, I wanted, because you have to take all those tests. So it was like, oh, you took this test, got this job, we want you. I felt that need was like met. Like someone wants me, and then you come in the Air Force and you're new, so everyone's trying to show you the way, and it's like, look at all this attention, help, So I fought. I was hungry for, and that definitely was like the beginning of me really understanding what it means to have.
I love it. I love it because what you're saying, I believe, is really fundamental to childhood trauma, and that people just need to understand it, right? A
Mhm.
lot of a lot of people think of trauma as something that happens to you, but really it wasn't a singular event for you. It was like the trauma lasted for, over a decade for you because you were unable to let it go. And s-
Mhm.
and so then you joined the military. And when you talk about how you kind of fell into the Air Force and that whole process, you remind me of something that a friend of mine said that I thought was really powerful. She said that your inner child is begging for you to listen.
Mm.
And I feel like that's what you did. Your inner child said, I just want someone to want me, and you answered the call. S-
Yeah.
that's powerful. It's amazing for me, but at the same time, it's not like it ended there. It hasn't been all, what do we say? Sunshines and rainbows.
Sunshine. Yeah.
It's basic. And so from there, I want to talk about kind of what happened with your brothers, but then also how just how your life experience empowered you to be of service to other people in need during that time.
Yeah, uh, that's a great question too. You're great with the questions because I excelled that first couple years of the Air Force, but then that like third year is when my stepfather opened fire on my family. So yeah, uh, roadblock. Like wow, that was really difficult. Um, Yeah, that was a really difficult time. I'm just thinking back because it's like it hasn't been 10 years, but also, it there's been so much growth since that time. Um that like yeah, it was the start of my, I'm not going to say failures in the Air Force, but it was the start of me going down the hill of success. And I say this because there's a balance of the fact that the Air Force filled a gap of me wanting to want it. There's a balance of that because now I'm depending on the Air Force and my flight chiefs and the validation of awards and coins to tell me that I'm good enough instead of me knowing it. So when that trauma happened, it tore my world apart where I'm now having to heal. So I'm not able to be as great. So I'm not getting that recognition and awards and coins. I'm getting help and therapy and all that. So that started a very hard journey that I'm thankful for now of me owning my own story, my own truth, and knowing that just me showing up is enough. Not me showing up with coins or awards or someone saying, yes, she's here. Just Amori is enough because after that trauma happened, a few serious traumas happened in my Air Force career that caused me to have to step away. So join the Air Force, killing it, did great. Um, Everything happens with my family, heal from that. Go to my next base, first year, killed it, did great. Trauma happens my second year. So arrives now at my like next base, did great, have issues that I'm now able to overcome, but still it's like this, it was this cycle of me getting to a point where I was like, okay, I can't depend on awards and things in the Air Force to make me happy. I have to know myself because yes, as you said, since I've been in the Air Force, three huge events trauma have happened. So it hasn't been all sunshine and rainbows. It was only that in the very beginning. And that's probably when I felt the happiest to be in. Whereas now it's like I'm happy to be in also, but there was a time of balancing. You don't need awards and coins and recognition to be happy. And during that time of learning, I was very unhappy in the military because I wasn't getting, Amori, we want you. You're great. Come here. Like I was getting like, are you okay?
Yeah.
Maybe I should like talk to someone. And I'm like, are you serious? Where's my like, Amori, we want you. Like, where's where are those things? So I found out that it's all about your perspective and where you are in your life when it comes to ups and downs. Because people aren't always going to give you validation and you're not always going to get awards. But if you can always know your own story and yourself and own it and really like embrace who you are, no matter what happens to you externally, you're always going to be able to stand in after everything. And so yeah, a lot there because that the military has been one of my greatest blessings with learning lessons, but it's also been some of my greatest pains. But out of pain comes blessings and a building of character if you choose to go through it and overcome.
Yeah, definitely, right? You definitely have a choice And a lot of times you don't feel like we have a choice. And then there's the options of, enduring the pain, getting over it. But then there's also the choice of your perspective. And so you have the good times and the bad times. And one thing I think about is, am I having a good career with bad moments or a bad career with good moments?
Mm-hmm.
And so then you have to decide, because it's not something that someone else can answer for you. It's I've made the decision.
Yep.
Yeah. And so I really feel like, well, let me ask you this. So how did all of these things, it's almost like you had two separate Air Force lives, right? And sometimes those two lives ran parallel at the same time.
Yep.
But how did all of that help you just to be a leader? Because I know every airman's a leader.
Right.
So how would you say those things helped you or influenced your leadership style?
Oh, such a great question. So I talked a lot about what I was going through at the time. But when I'd say, I don't know how to phrase this correctly, but I'll say in my second wave of deep depression. Because when everything happened with the troop, my brother-in-law losing my uncle, it actually opened the door for unresolved issues with the trauma of my family. So I was going through everything all over again. But I was also a team lead. I was literally building a mission, and from the ground up, first at the time, training everyone up, coming up with strategy to make sure everyone felt included, figuring out how to get funding for training, um, fighting people. Obviously, there's also competition that want to challenge you and be a better leader. I'm going through all that at work. And then I go home and I have to deal with chronic depression. OMG. It,
Yes.
it was so much. And that's when the suicidal thought came up. It's like, I can't. This is too much. Like, but then it's like, the one end is that, and then the other end is the fighter in me that's like, no, like, people need me. I can overcome this. So those two thoughts are always always opposing, always fighting. Then I'm having to be a leader and still having to take care of myself. And I was also in a relationship. So I'm trying to communicate to my partner, hey, this is what I'm going through, when my partner at the time was very happy all the time and he hadn't been through trauma. So, like, all of that is happening. And so, how that shaped my leadership is so important to me, and I don't see it enough. I really get to know my environment, and not
Yes.
in an invasive way. If you just show people that you care, they will tell you when something is going on. And now I'm very patient with that. If I hadn't been through anything, I might have been like, well, did you talk to someone? Have you gone to therapy? But now I'm like, hey, and also having that coaching background, I'm like, do you have some time where we can actually talk about this? Even if I'm doing something, if I have a task, if I have a meeting, if I can cancel that meeting, if I can like say, hey, does this task have to be done now or can I send it later? I will, to make time for the people I'm leading. And I've seen so many great things. I've had sailors in the Navy tell me, like, you were the best supervisor in my career. And if I had you sooner, I wouldn't be getting out. That's direct feedback. I've had some of them tell me, like, hey, I'm in leadership class. They asked me to write a paper on someone I admire, and I wrote it on you. And so those became my trophies and my win. I changed my perspective. Like, it doesn't have to be a thing that's tangible. It's about preserving the life and the livelihood of those I'm leading, because I have that power. They can either come to work and it's just a job, or they can come to work, know that someone believes in them, know that someone hears and cares, and you don't even have to tell them how to do stuff. People will do stuff, even me, because they know that the leader cares about them. way better than if you just tell them you want it done this way and that way. So it's really helped me to put people first. And a lot of people say that and then don't ask those easy questions of walking by, seeing something's going on with someone and saying, "Hey, you want to take a walk?" That simple. It helped me to be very cognizant of how small asking if someone's okay in a leadership position is. I feel that a lot of leaders stray from that. They're like, "Oh, I'm not a therapist." It's like, but you're a leader. You're leading people, not mission. People run those missions. And so, again, I'm just very cognizant about putting people first now because that actually wasn't done for me. So I was going through all that. And then there was one person that really cared and he was awesome, but not enough people in leadership positions were asking those questions.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. I heard that during my career and even now about the idea of just connecting. And so
Right.
what I want you to do is maybe just give me a little extra blurb about the importance of empathy.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I was just reading something about like empathy and compassion. So funny you bring that up, but I think first I want to say everyone doesn't have, and I didn't know that.
Yes.
So I was really mad at my leaders for not asking if everything is okay. But then, as I've like learned lessons and really worked on myself, I realized they didn't have the tool to be empathetic. And so empathy is so important for any connection, like you were saying, of any relationship, especially the supervisory role. Um, it's it doesn't have to be this big thing. I think I've learned that because I've been like in the trenches of depression. So maybe, it's hard for people to have empathy because they're like, oh, if I have empathy, I'm gonna have to sit with this person and their stuff, and like I have my own stuff. And it's like, no, empathy just like try to know and understand. And a lot of times it's just listening. Just ask the question of, are you okay? Be there, give hugs, give words of encouragement. Or maybe like give give to them what it is that you have to give. So I'm an encourager and an empowerer and a motivator and a coach. Like so I can give a lot, but maybe you can only give like a podcast that you listened to yesterday and there was a quote. That's enough because it's just showing that you have empathy to like listen and then also you have an action to help.
Right.
Maybe you're just giving them a hug after everything. You're like, wow, I get it. Can I give you a hug? That's enough. It really is. Like things like that would have saved like me so much heart if there was just a little bit more empathy and connection and intention in leadership roles. It really doesn't take a lot.
I love that. I love you bringing up hugs because a hug is something that when you give someone a hug, you get something out of it too. It's not a
Yeah.
one way thing. And when we talk about trauma, we talk about stress and anxiety. It's what's going on is that your whole body is reacting, right? It's your emotions are physiological. And so when you give someone a hug, it actually gives them a moment in time for them to feel safe in their own bodies.
Wow.
And sometimes that's a whole lot better than 90-minute video or meeting conversation, right? It's just give them
Yes.
a hug and you actually feel that. Like you can feel when you hug someone, you can feel the shoulders come down a little bit.
Right.
You can
Right.
feel that big exhale. And so I love that you brought that up. Um, so you mentioned coaching, and so what I want to know is just kind of your coaching style. Can you tell me about that?
I can. I am an encourager, and like you can see that all over me. That's how I communicate. And, the funny story is I communicate that way because I need it so bad my entire life. If someone would have just given me like a word of encouragement or like belief in me, it's like a drink of water to your soul when someone gives you a word of encouragement, like, oh, you see me, and you're like giving me words that's gonna help me through my day. So when I'm coaching, it's all about, first off, let's get you confident. Let's get you knowing that you deserve to be seen, that you deserve to be coached, that you deserve to thrive. And let's empower that. Let's give you something, under your feet to make that a foundation. So it's not just me giving you work, but we can set a strategy in place to empower you throughout life. And then, like I mentioned, strategy. Being in the Air Force, as you know, being in the military, PowerPoints, that's how you do things. So that was a blessing for me because it uncovered a, gift that I have to connect visually. So I give my clients personalized strategies that I create for them, like No Kidding Create, to help them see where they're at, where they're going, and how we can get. So that's something a little different that I do, vice just giving like feedback or giving notes afterwards. I do create strategies because I'm a visual. That way you can put it up somewhere and it's like, this is mine, this is my plan. And I make it pretty, I make it great. It makes the process of coaching when things hurt a little bit better, I think, when you're getting encouraged, empowered, and you have a strategy that shows you where you're at, where you're going, how you're going to get. So I definitely say that I'm an encouraging coach.
I love that. I love it. Oh man, it's you said you said words of encouragement are like a drink of water for the soul. I'm gonna remember that. I'm gonna remember
True.
that. I love that. I love that so much. And one thing about coaching people is that not everyone needs the long program, right? The 8, 12 week program or whatever.
Yes.
How often would you say that you deal with people in uniform where it's let me give you 15, 20 minutes of coaching here and there? Like how is that a part of what you do?
Oh, it's an everyday thing, and it'll be this huge impact where I'll see it like, domino in their everyday way of leading or just doing their job. So a lot of times, coaching is all about it is about helping to empower you in your decision making. It's not me telling you what to do. It's me being your trainer in your corner, helping you to see how great you are. And so when you do that in a military environment, it's very impactful because the military is a machine. And sometimes you can feel like the uniform and your job is who you are. And so I feel that coaching just for like 10 minutes, really, you say 15, 20, but sometimes I have like one off conversations for 5 to 10 minutes with folks who are in the military, and you see the light bulb, and you also see you know, the chest go up a little bit with that confidence, like your head goes up a little bit. You see those aha moments of like, yeah, I could do that. Yeah, I am. You're right. I am good at that. That is a great idea. And then they'll go on their merry way and make some document or just make something great. And so it's been really great for that skill to be able to help people in any capacity, not just the military, for any amount of time. To know that they are more capable than they thought.
I love that. I really love that because when you talk about seeing the confidence, the raising the chest, the chin up,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know, it goes back to emotions are physiological.
yep,
You feel confident in your whole body. And when you're hurting, when you're depressed, when you're
yeah.
dealing with trauma or tragedy, and someone says it's all in your head, well, they're completely wrong. They're completely wrong. You definitely feel it in your whole body. And you had mentioned in a previous conversation about you. I just want you to talk a little bit about your journey, about how you're using fitness in a way in your
Yes.
journey and how that ties into who you are, your resilience, your path.
I love that because I haven't talked about fitness at all, huh? But that definitely brings us to today. Because, like you were saying before when we started this, we were just talking about the journey and how I was able to overcome, and how it's important that if you're going to help other people overcome, you need to overcome yourself. So, one thing that's important when changing your life, I would say, because also I say with trauma, there's the reason that you get so depressed is because you're changing your unexpectedly. So now it's like, who am I? What is my world? So, a lot of times you can go to different vices that may not be the most healthy. And I did that for a while. And then it's who you hang around. My friend who was in bodybuilding invited me to a team who is doing bodybuilding. So not just am I into fitness, but like I'm always going the extreme. Like I actually do the competitions as well. And it's changed my life. And doing fitness allowed me to replace those habits with something great. And now it's become a part of me. And working off like stress and being able to do cardio and like think through things instead of like sitting with it at home and then going into like kind of depression tunnels. It's like whenever you're working, just like you were saying, you're exerting the energy that may not be that great, out. Whether you're lifting something heavy, whether you're doing cardio, it's getting all that stuff that's been like boiling inside or that you've been thinking about out. And like when you're done with your workout, you're able to breathe and you're like, wow, I was able to kind of work through some of those things. Whereas if I wouldn't have, I would have like went home and dwelled on it and it wouldn't have been good. So I do a holistic coaching. So right now I'm doing life coaching. Very soon I will have my personal trainer cert, but I've already started coaching people with fitness. So holistically, it's all about that mental and physical to help you get to that thriving, standpoint in your life. So I think fitness is so important. It doesn't have to be lifting weights. I think we were talking before, like it can be yoga, it can be things that you just love to do, like aerobics. It could be Zumba. Like there's so many different ways to get, your body moving so that you're believing in yourself and you're seeing what you're capable of. So you it's very important.
Definitely. I love that. I mean, for you, you've experienced extreme trauma, and then on the flip side, you're going all in competing on the stage in bodybuilding, right? So it's one
Yes.
end to the exact opposite, but not everyone has to do that.
No.
And that's the self-awareness piece that you were talking about, like doing what you love to do. Because when I talk to people with my clients, I've suggested yoga, tai chi, take some salsa dancing lessons,
Yeah. I
like
love that.
whatever it is. And and really it's about feeling safe in your body. And so what happens in the beginning is you realize I can do this and I'm safe. I can throw some weights around, walk on a treadmill, do a little dancing, and I'm safe. But then the growth begins.
Yeah.
It's not just I feel safe, it's look at me, I've changed. And then that helps rewire your brain as well. And so there's so much to your story, right? And you cannot, I mean, we're coming up on an hour. We have not been able to cover everything, but you told me about a couple places where people can go and hear your story. So the first thing I want to ask you about is your TED Talk.
Yes. I know. I didn't even mention that.
So tell me about that. How, like, what kind of inspired you to even go that route? And then how did you feel? Like, how did doing a TED Talk make you feel about yourself?
Yeah. So my TED Talks was so impactful for me. And I just hope that it was impactful for others. But it was so impactful for me because, like I'd mentioned before, I was not happy with how leadership handled an airman going through. And I needed to be the change I wanted to see. So, because no one, I felt, um, I hadn't really been asked what's going on and what's your story. It was very important for me to be really big about what my story was and everything I'd overcome in that time of being in that. So that's what the TEDx was to me. Like, hey guys, this is what I was going through. So again, I'm always doing something extreme, but that really is, I wanted to share my story. I wanted people to know, hey, I know that you saw me as a leader or a team lead and I these things, but I want you to know that during that time I was going through this. This is how depressed I was during that. This is how strong I am to be standing there even after like going through those things and being a lead. Like I wanted to scream that like this is my story, because it was just so important to me. One, for awareness, and then two, there were other women going through this. I didn't really know that until the end of my time that command, but there were other women who were just hard charging at work and going home depressed. And so I needed to be a representation of, not just the women, but the people that are charging in everyday life, but going home lonely or depressed or down on themselves, and then no one sees it. So I needed to be that voice. And when I did that talk, I had people coming up to me. I did not expect that because, again, I just did it because I was like, hey, this is what I was going through. Um, so to have other people say, hey, wow, what an amazing like journey. What an amazing thing, because out of all that, because I got so many lessons from the pain, my motto, and even in coaching, is to celebrate the journey. A lot of times we celebrate the prize, and we celebrate the culmination of it all, but celebrate the journey. Because if you can get through those times, like, man, you will be so appreciative for like the businesses or books or podcasts or things that come out of you overcoming those things in your darkest times. It will be the catalyst of some of the greatest times in your life, because you end up cultivating into things that change the world and change people's lives. I feel that that's what that TEDx was for me.
I love it. I love celebrating the journey, right?
Yeah. So
Um, because it's hard to celebrate the losses in the midst of losing.
it is.
But if you can take a macro level view of your life, you recognize, and this is just one L, right? And the only way that you have losses is by actually trying, right? Like the only people who are undefeated are the only people who never entered the game.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
um, but speaking of the journey and entering the game and your story, there is another place where people can learn about your story, the journey that you're
Yeah.
celebrating.
Absolutely. So, during all this time, my family actually, so I didn't talk about the aftermath of my stepfather opening fire on my family, but it was a miracle. And we're so thankful to God because, like, my little brother, even though he was shot a few times in places that really render you dead, like, he is alive and well. And he went on to play football in college and he's getting his master's degree. He graduates in May, and he's working with the mayor of Chicago to like really just bring great things to different corridors. So he has Soul City that he's creating in Chicago. So it's like, wow, like from all that, he's still here. And so my family was reached out to by Tony Harris, who did a documentary on them, and a few other families when it comes to domestic violence after he heard our family story. So you can watch free actually on Amazon Prime. My family will be the first family who speaks, and they'll be the last family who speaks. I think it's families, but it really goes in depth, like trigger warning there on what happened to my family. But then it ends with like the blessing of a miracle. And I truly believe that for everyone, like there are miracles in your journeys of darkness. And that's where they come from. Like you said, if you don't get into the arena battle, like you don't get to like have the failure if you're just on the sideline. So for the people that do battle and get in the nitty gritty, like there are miracles there. Whether you're gonna change your life or whether you're gonna change other people's or whether you're just gonna see a change in yourself, you know. So I truly believe that, my faith in God is what helped me to move forward. And that is reflected in the documentary as well. So I'm just really proud of how my family as a whole has come together and overcome that specific trauma together, and where we are today is amazing.
I absolutely love it. I like your story. It's crazy because just big picture view, when you went through trauma as a child, when you went through trauma as a 20-year-old, shortly after joining the Air Force, you didn't think, 10 years later, someone would be saying, I love it. but
Right.
but you are such an example of really, like you said, celebrating the journey, because every bit of your journey, all of the trauma enabled you to really empower people today. And the truth is, when someone is struggling and you encourage and empower them today, you can't know the impact. You don't know how many people would have been suicidal if they never met you. Like,
Hmm.
we can't count that. You don't know how many lives you've saved, because people don't even realize, you can't think, what would my path have been if I haven't met you. What they do is they just have the appreciation in the moment. And that's why I'm so grateful that you're here talking to me, and I have your contact info for anyone that wants to reach out to you, because your story is absolutely amazing. And here's another thing: a lot of people will hear your story and will think, I don't think I could have survived that. I don't think I would have endured that. And I believe that you are a testimony that you can survive and thrive if you choose to.
Yes.
And so what I want to ask you, as we close out, is, if there is someone who's been through some trauma and they don't think that they can make it through, what would you say to that person?
I say your life is worth living. You were made for a purpose. Like it is not a mistake that you're, and if you feel alone, you're not alone. There's so many people that are going through what you're going through, and so many people that are going to make it out. And when you make it out, you're going to have something to give back to the world, because they're going to see that if you did it, they can do it too. You are an prayer to your family, to the people around you, to people that you don't even know. That people do see you. They might not say it verbally, but they see you and they see how great you are. So never stop believing. Never stop listening to the whispers of hope, even when like the voice of anger and guilt and suicide are screaming. Listen to the little whisper of hope and follow that. Even though it's small, like it is worth it and it will make you happy. Smile when you can. Post different motivational quotes around your house and sticky notes. So when you turn the corner, you see, I am worthy, I am great, because you are. And I would love to meet you. You can always contact me so I can just send you words of encouragement to let you know that you are loved and that you are worth it and you are worthy to live this life. This life was made for you. You deserve to thrive. That's what I would say.
Thank you so much. I love those powerful words of encouragement. I'm so grateful for you being here, and I'm grateful for everyone that tuned in or watched, whether live or on the replay, maybe on YouTube. And so, yeah, I'm grateful for you. I'm appreciative of really the power, the strength, and resilience that you've brought with you through all of this. And so I just want to say thank you. And to everyone watching and listening, until next time, thank you very much. I appreciate
Thanks
you.
so much.